Right now, look at the nearest mirror. You see a face, and you instantly know it's yours. You've known this your entire life. It feels obvious. Of course, that's you. But there was a time you looked into a mirror and saw a stranger. You didn't know that face was your own. You may have reached behind the glass, searching for the other baby. That baby was you, and you had no idea. Most people think recognizing yourself is automatic, that any creature with working eyes can do it. But that's not true at all. In 1970, a scientist named Gordon Gallup wanted to answer a strange question. Which animals actually have a sense of self? So he built one simple test. He called it the mirror test. And what he found splits the entire animal kingdom in two. Some creatures look into a mirror and understand. Most never figure it out. Stay till the end. Because the final animal on this list should not be able to recognize anything. And it quietly breaks everything we thought we knew about the mind. So here's how the test actually worked. Gallup took a group of chimpanzees, and he gave them a mirror. At first, they did exactly what you'd expect. They treated the reflection like a total stranger. They puffed up. They threatened it. They tried to look behind the glass to find the other chimp. They were certain another animal was in the room. But Gallup didn't take the mirror away. He left it there. And after a few days, something shifted. The chimps stopped fighting the glass, and they started using it. One chimp began picking food out of its own teeth while watching the reflection. Another opened its mouth and inspected the inside. Parts of its body it had never seen in its life. The mirror had stopped being an enemy. It had become a tool, a way to look at itself, but Gallup knew that wasn't proof. He needed something undeniable. So he designed something clever. He put each chimp to sleep. And while they were unconscious, he painted a bright red mark on the eyebrow and the ear. The paint had no smell. It had no feeling. The chimp couldn't sense it was there. Then he woke them up and handed them the mirror. And this is the exact moment that changed science. The chimp looked into the glass. It saw the red mark in the reflection, and then it slowly reached up and touched the mark on its own face. Not the mirror, its own skin. It understood something almost no animal can, that the thing in the glass is me. Now here's where this gets personal, because there is one animal that fails this exact test for years. You. In 1972, a researcher named Beulah Amsterdam ran the same experiment on human babies. A small spot of red on the nose, then a mirror. And the babies just didn't get it. A 1-year-old will pat the glass, they'll smile at the other baby, they'll lean in and try to play with it. They have no idea they are looking at themselves. And then, somewhere around 18 months, something clicks. The toddler suddenly reaches up and touches the red spot on their own nose. They freeze. They stare. For the very first time, they realize the baby in the mirror is them. That is the moment a human being becomes self-aware. And here's the part that should unsettle you. You don't remember it. Somewhere around your 2nd birthday, you switched on. A self appeared behind your eyes, and there is no memory of the time before it. You were alive. You were breathing. But you weren't quite a you yet. Think about that. There is a person in your old baby photos, and that person didn't know they were a person. So after Gallup, scientists got obsessed. They wanted to know who else could do this. So they tested everything they could get a mirror in front of. And the results were shocking, because almost nothing passes. Out of millions of species on Earth, only a tiny handful recognize themselves. Chimpanzees pass, bonobos pass, orangutans pass. They are our closest relatives, so maybe that makes sense. But then it gets strange. In 2001, a scientist named Diana Rice tested bottlenose dolphins in New York. She marked their bodies and put a mirror in their tank, and the dolphins swam straight up to it. They twisted, they rolled, they spun their bodies to look at the marks. Marks on places they could never normally see. The dolphins knew exactly who was staring back. Then came the elephants. In 2006, a team gave a giant mirror to an Asian elephant named Happy at the Bronx Zoo. They painted a white X on her forehead, a mark she could only ever see in a reflection. Happy walked up to the glass, and she lifted her trunk, and she touched the X on her own head, a creature the size of a truck, quietly checking herself in the mirror. And every time one of these animals passed, it meant the same incredible thing. Somewhere inside that skull was a sense of me. But here's what makes absolutely no sense. Some of the animals you'd bet your life on completely fail. Gorillas. Gorillas are great apes. They're brilliant. They're social. They feel grief and love and jealousy. By every bit of logic, they should pass this test easily. But most gorillas don't. They look into the mirror and get confused, or anxious, or they just look away. And for a long time, this made no sense. Until scientists realized something. For a gorilla, staring into another face is dangerous. A long, locked stare means a fight is about to start. So when a gorilla gorilla sees its reflection meet its eyes, every instinct screams to look away. It never relaxes long enough to solve the puzzle. Its own nature hides the truth from it. And that's a clue. Maybe failing the mirror doesn't mean there's no self inside. Maybe it just means the test is blind to that animal's world. And nothing proves that better than the creature sitting next to you right now. Your dog. Because dogs fail the mirror test completely. Your dog will bark at its reflection, or sniff the glass, or just walk away bored. And for years, people used this as proof that dogs have no real sense of self. But hold on, because maybe we were testing them in the wrong language. A dog doesn't really live in a world of sight. A dog lives in a world of smell. Their nose is their reality. A dog can smell a single drop of something in a swimming pool of water. So in 2017, a scientist named Alexandra Horowitz had a wild idea. Forget the mirror. What if a dog recognizes itself by scent? So she took each dog's own urine. That smell is basically a dog's reflection. Then she made a second sample. The same smell, but slightly changed. A new scent added on top. Like painting a red mark, but for the nose instead of the eyes. And the dogs reacted exactly like Gallup's chimps. Their own untouched smell, they barely sniffed it. They already knew it. It was just me. But the altered smell, they stopped, and they sniffed it long and hard, investigating. That's my scent, but something is different. The dog recognized itself, just not with its eyes. And that quietly rewrites the entire question. Maybe the mirror test was never measuring self-awareness at all. Maybe, for some animals, it was only measuring eyesight. But the strangest results were still coming, because then they tested a bird. In 2008, scientists in Germany put a small mirror in front of a magpie, and they stuck a tiny yellow dot on its throat, right under the chin. A spot the bird could only ever see in its reflection. Now, birds are supposed to be simple. We even use bird brain as an insult. But the magpie looked in the mirror, and it started scratching at its own throat, clawing at the exact spot where the dot was hidden, trying to scrape it off, and when the dot was removed, the scratching stopped. A bird had just passed a test most mammals fail, the first creature outside of the great apes and their cousins to do it, and suddenly the neat little family tree of self-awareness fell apart. This wasn't just a primate thing anymore, something deeper was going on, which finally brings us to the last animal, the one that shouldn't be possible. In 2019, a scientist named Masanori Koda in Japan tested a tiny fish, the cleaner rasa, a fish smaller than your finger, with a brain the size of a grain of rice. He placed a colored mark on its throat, a mark once again only visible in a mirror. And then he simply watched. At first, the fish did what they all do. It attacked the glass. It thought it was facing a rival, just like the chimps, just like the magpie. Then, slowly, it calmed down, and then the fish did something nobody was ready for. It swam right up to the mirror. It tilted its whole body to study the mark, and then it dove to the bottom of the tank, and it scraped its throat against the sand, exactly where the mark was. Then, it swam back up to the mirror to check if the mark was gone. A fish, inspecting itself in a reflection, trying to scrub off a spot it could only see in the glass. And the science world erupted. Because there are only two ways to explain it. Either this famous test doesn't really measure a self at all, or something like a self is hiding inside far more creatures than we ever dared to imagine, even the ones we always called mindless. So step back for 1 second and really think about what's happening here. What does it actually mean to recognize yourself? It sounds so simple, but it might be one of the deepest things a mind can ever do. To recognize yourself, you first have to know that you exist. You have to carry a picture of yourself inside your head, and then match it to the thing standing in the glass. That single ability might be the seed of everything that makes us human. Knowing you are alive, knowing that one day you won't be, lying awake at night asking who you really are. Most living things on this planet never do any of that. They eat, they run, they survive, but they go their whole lives and never once meet themselves. And that brings us all the way back to you, back to that tiny red dot on a baby's nose. There was a day, long before you can remember, when you met yourself for the very first time. A blurry face in the glass slowly turned into you. And from that day on, you have never been able to unsee it. You carry that self everywhere now, into every mirror, every photo, every quiet thought at 3 in the morning. A chimp carries it. A dolphin carries it. An elephant, a magpie, maybe even a fish smaller than your finger. And so do you. But here is the strangest truth of all. You didn't always. For the first years of your life, you were a person who didn't know they were a person. So look in the mirror tonight. That face has been with you every single day you've been alive. But once, it was a complete stranger. And one quiet morning, with no one there to tell you, you finally recognized yourself.